What you cheering? I'm a single mother with nobody that loves me or my child. What you cheering for?
When parties approach Judge Lake's paternity court with paternity disputes, at least one of the parties believes the child belongs to the man while the other doubts it. This case does not seem different from the beginning.
Claim your rights as a potential father to the child in question today. 2-year-old Angel Bryant were basically stolen from you. You've had doubts about paternity from the beginning.
The defendant seems to have a perfect story on why there is a paternity doubt. But there's one dark secret about the payment of child support.
You admit to sleeping with another man while with Mr. Green, but say you're still positive he is Angel's father because the other man used protection. That both men are currently paying child support.
The relationship between the parties seems reasonable, but Judge Lake wants to understand how they met at first.
I meet her was New Year's night from the club. I took her home, then we just talked for a little bit, changed numbers. We did not sleep together, and this was about 3 months later. So we first had sex around May.
During the relationship, the defendant was mainly unfaithful, which compounded the paternity doubts.
He knew I was talking to someone, but I told him we broke up, but I was still talking to him.
All right, so you basically lied and told him you weren't talking to the guy anymore, but you were.
Yes.
And you weren't just talking to him. You were still having sex with him, too.
Yes.
The plaintiff claims he thought the defendant was single when he met her. He would not have continued with the relationship if he had believed otherwise.
Pregnant.
I got sick. I had gallstones, and also, congratulations, you're 9.5 weeks pregnant.
Really? She was the first person you called?
Yes.
And so what was your reaction? Were you happy?
I just couldn't believe it.
The plaintiff has never had another child despite being 54 years old, and he hopes the DNA results will prove that he is the father of the defendant's child.
If I'm supposed to be the child's father, I would have been there at the time of birth, and also my name would be on the birth certificate, Your Honor.
The plaintiff is furious that the defendant never called him at the time of birth. She also denied him the right to have his name on the birth certificate and now receives child support from the plaintiff and another man.
The dream that a child was being born, and I called the emergency room. Sure enough, they told me that Miss Duncan was in the emergency room.
During my pregnancy, this other guy, he stepped up and he was with me through my whole pregnancy.
The parties then started going back and forth on who was at fault for the plaintiff's absence at the time of childbirth. Judge Lake then asks when the plaintiff was informed that the child might not be his.
It was like 6 or 7 months down the road after doing her pregnancy. Then she told me, she said, well, the baby may not be yours. And that's why I found out the baby may be who she said it may be.
The plaintiff then explained that he met the other guy after the baby was born, but it was not a pleasant affair.
Okay, I took her home, and he was outside waiting for her. And that kind of hurt. And he said, I come to see my daughter. I said, that's your daughter, that's my daughter. And that's like embarrassing, you know. He was already there waiting for her to come home.
At this point, the support from both men started taking center stage, and the plaintiff complained about how the defendant had handled the child's upkeep.
Everybody make mistakes.
Okay?
Like you playing me, you playing him. You get what you can get from him.
I'm not playing with him.
You get what you can get from me.
No, oh no. So how I'm playing you?
How would you feel if I do the same thing to you if I was vice versa?
You.
Every time the baby needs shoes, the baby needs pampers, the baby needs this, your daughter needs this. How do I know it's my daughter?
The parties explained how their relationship thrived until the paternity doubts set in, and they got emotional at some point.
Both of you are in tears right now. And is that because you feel like your mistakes have negatively affected this child, or you feel like you've had to hold back from her?
I feel that I'm getting too attached to the child. I love her, and I can't get all the love that a father should give his daughter.
Defendant tries to explain how both men have provided for the baby until today's case, but the other guy seems to have an issue.
But up until about 3 or 4 months ago, he was providing for her?
Yes.
In what way?
He bring me $200 or $300 a month.
And he get her clothes?
Yes.
Then he just disappeared?
I don't know where he at.
But she didn't call him daddy?
No.
After the emotional moments, Judge Lake reached out for the envelope to unveil the paternity test results.
Ronald Green, you are not her father.
Paternity court cases typically feature situations where the man doubts the paternity of a child due to cheating allegations, and he wants DNA results to back his claim. In this episode, the case features a new breed that seems to be heading in the wrong direction.
You're here to prove to your ex-boyfriend, Scotty Rasmussen, that he is not the father of your 3-year-old daughter, Zaylee Rasmussen.
Yes, Your Honor.
When a woman says her partner is not the father of a child in open court and hopes the DNA results will prove that, she might be taking a considerable risk. However, there are genuine reasons why women believe their partners are not the birth fathers of their children.
Honor.
Mr. Rasmussen, you claim the real reason Ms. Miller is denying you're Zaylee's father is because she hates you.
Yes, Your Honor.
You say you've been there for your daughter her entire life, and you're here today to prove you are Zaylee's father.
Yes, Your Honor.
At this point, the defendant claims the conditions of their relationship and the amount of effort he has put in whenever he wants to see his child.
Your Honor, I believe it's just out of pure hatred. She just doesn't want me to have visitation. I drive 160 miles every other weekend just to pick up my daughter and drop her off.
The defendant believes the plaintiff hates him because he was the first to move on and get another partner after their relationship. The defendant then denies this claim and explains why their relationship got sour.
Yes, I was very mad at him for being a cheater. He cheated on me through pretty much our whole relationship.
You don't want him to have the visitation, is that true?
Yes, Your Honor.
Why is that?
Because I believe that the only reason why he wants the visitation is to claim her on his taxes.
The plaintiff claims that the defendant only requests custody because he needs to claim the child on his taxes. The defendant claims he spends more to see his child weekly, and Judge Lake agrees.
I'm paying my child support. I have my child support payments right here, plus an additional $3 fee, plus an additional $60 annual fee just to pay my child support.
The defendant complains about how the plaintiff spends the money for child support. He claims the child usually wears the same clothes whenever he picks her up.
When she was conceived in March of 2011. He wasn't even in the same state. He was in Vegas. And at that time in March, I wasn't even with him. I was with somebody else because he broke up with me because he cheated on me.
The relationship between the plaintiff and defendant features infidelity issues, but the man is guilty this time. Judge Lake does not understand why the plaintiff has allowed the defendant to continue paying child support when she believes someone else is the father.
I believed I was, and still believe, I was the only biological father until about 5 or 6 months or so, give or take, after she was born. I could possibly not be the father because of another man that was involved, and she gave some date, I can't remember.
Plaintiff's child bears the defendant's last name, and he drives more than 100 miles to see her every weekend. This is mainly because the defendant was led to believe he was the father at the time of birth, until a few months later.
Did the math, and it turns out that would be a 10-month pregnancy, and that don't make sense to me.
Through all of my notes, all of anything that I wrote down, and I figured out that she was conceived in March and it was a 9-month pregnancy.
The defendant claims his name is on the birth certificate and he always believed the plaintiff's child was his daughter. The defendant's claim in court baffles the plaintiff, but he needs to verify with the help of today's DNA results.
I was at the birth, I was at every single doctor's appointment. I turned off my checkout light, told the next customer in line that something came up, I either had to go to another line.
The defendant explains how he reacted when he heard that the plaintiff was in labor and how he was there for her.
From the moment she got there to the moment she was discharged, I called my boss at work and said, hey, I got to take some days off. I don't care if you fire me or whatever, but I got to stay here. My daughter's being born.
The plaintiff remembers that encounter in a very different way, and the parties try to reconcile the differences in their versions of the story.
He was born, he was gone. He ran out of the room. I didn't see him for 20 minutes after that. On his computer in the corner, not paying attention to me, in his own little bubble.
At that point in the relationship, the parties were not at loggerheads. Judge Lake asked how the dispute started.
I gave my daughter my last name.
Because we were engaged, and I thought we were going to get married. I thought we were going to have a happy life. One of his friends told me everything that he was doing throughout our entire relationship, cheating on me, going to multiple places to meet multiple girls.
Judge Lake believes if the defendant is not the father, then the plaintiff should disclose the whereabouts of the other possible father.
Not even quite sure. After we broke up, he changed his number, he moved, he pretty much disappeared. I have tried to find him, I have tried to get a hold of him, and I can't find him.
The plaintiff seems to be hiding the paternity doubts from the defendant until 5 or 6 months after his daughter's birth.
The more she grew up, the more I started noticing more of her features, the more she started looking like the other guy.
When I was 3, and a picture of her from just the other day.
Let me see that. Will you hand that to me, Jerome?
Believe it or not, when I was 3 years old, I had blonde hair.
The DNA results are already available, and Judge Lake must settle the paternity doubts with this.
Are not the father. Miss Miller.
Be respectful.
Sorry.
Miss Miller.
I'm sorry.
That's a lot of nerve considering the alternative is somebody that don't want nothing to do with you or your child.
I'm sorry.
That's a lot of nerve.